Happy Friday and welcome to the Freedom from the Press podcast. My name is Jason Robertson and I'm here with my partner in crime,
Todd Peterson. Thank you for joining us today, folks. News cycle blowing up as always, and just want to welcome our viewers, Jason Kagan Girl in the chat. Thanks for joining us on Rumble. Folks, we have said this often at the end of the show too, so I want to lead it today. Thank you for tuning into Freedom from the Press. You guys have so many options out there, what podcasts to listen to, where to get news sources from, what community to join as you hate the government and hate the media. But thank you for choosing us every Friday morning. Jason and I love this hour because, honestly, Jason, it's one of the easiest jobs in the world to point out how the media lies because there are so many examples.
Oh my gosh, I gotta say it. Todd and I, we always hop on a little early. We chat. It's like our Friday little touch base where we talk about business. And we're like, is it me or is this not? And I think Todd said it first this week. Like, is this not the best hour or two of the week where we get to hang out, engage with fun people on different social media platforms? And our goal, like Todd said, is to let you know you're not crazy. This stuff is happening. There are people that think like you and see the same things you do. And American citizens are sick and tired of the corrupt media, the corrupt government. We sent Donald Trump in to be a wrecking ball, and let's take America back. Let's make it great again. And we're just trying to do our little part here at the Freedom from the Press podcast. And this week is, Todd, we've been saying it, but it feels like this week continues a tipping point of media false narratives.
Yeah, it's incredible, Jason. If you think back 8 years ago, 10 years ago, when they first started lying about Donald Trump every day, I mean, it would take off. CNN had some of the best ratings they've ever had. You would go to family get-togethers and then to be like, you voted for Donald Trump, shame on you. I told the story at Thanksgiving. It was absolutely quiet. Those people are not arrogant anymore. They know what's going on. Media ratings are crashing. And these hoaxes that they push, we're going to talk about Pete Hegseth today. When we go Rumble only, folks, we're going to talk about some revelations with FBI involvement a couple years ago at something that happened. And they die within 24 hours, in large part thanks to Elon Musk buying X, formerly Twitter. But it just doesn't catch on anymore. They pump out some lie and it gets debunked right away. The people aren't buying it. They're like, I know you've lied to me before. There's something not true about this statement. And they just don't get legs like they used to. Something is different.
Yeah, and I got to say, I mean, I have conflicting thoughts on Elon Musk. Overall, I think it's good. And he's doing a lot of good things. I mean, he's going to send people to Mars, electric cars, people that have concerns. I'm with you where like anybody that rich and powerful makes me nervous. But I don't think Trump wins 2024 without the freedom of Twitter. And not that he got to say so much on Twitter, but here's what happens. If you going back in time, the tentpole hoax, the Charlottesville hoax, Donald Trump says, this is a complex issue. There's very fine people on both sides. I'm not talking about the white supremacists. I'm talking about they deserve to be condemned. I'm talking about the citizens that are concerned about their history and their heritage. And they clip the part off where he condemns white supremacists. They run it on repeat. Now, 10 years later, there are still American citizens that vote, that go to the grocery store. Maybe they go to your church or your school or your work that still think they don't know Donald Trump condemned white supremacists. They think Donald Trump was a racist. And the media, this news cycle, tried to do things. We covered the bloodbath hoax where Donald Trump says, oh, the auto industry is going to be a bloodbath if you don't elect me. The media goes out running with Donald Trump said there'll be a bloodbath if he's not elected. And X shut it down. And too many influencers went out, said, here's the full quote, here's the real quote. And it's amazing. And since the election, MSNBC ratings, CNN ratings, they have cratered so bad. We wrote a couple articles on the AmericanTribune.com. The Hallmark Channel is getting better ratings than CNN is right now. And I think, like Todd said, I don't know what your guys' experience. Let us know in the chat. But Democrats are sitting there and they're going, you guys lied. You all said Donald Trump was Hitler. Now you're having him on your show and interviewing him. And all of a sudden, Joe Biden's sitting down breaking bread with him. And Jill Biden's making googly eyes at him. And wait a second. I thought we were all rallying against Hitler. And now you're hanging out with him. So
Yeah, pretty amazing times we live in. I'm going to go on a rant, Jason. I think, let us know in the comments below if I'm off base on this at all. It might have to be part of the strategy. I admit that. But Jason, we watched Donald Trump go on that explosive on his entire agenda. It is just one giant campaign for Trump. You're like, yes, more of that. That's why I voted for you. Please do that. But the part of me too is like Donald Trump. That might be me. Donald Trump. Oh, that's you. Donald Trump won the election because he got around corporate media. He went on independent podcasts, independent journalists. He went on Truth Social and got his message out on Twitter. He didn't need corporate media. So I see him go and sit down on NBC, and I'm just like, don't give them any more legitimacy. Like, they need him more than he needs them. So I don't want to see Trump. I don't want to see Vance. I don't want to see him make the interview rounds. Like, complete the destruction of corporate media. Go to all the other news sources out there. Let them die the death they deserve.
Yeah, I got to say, I got to apologize in advance if anybody hears loud noises. We're getting our bathrooms remodeled. And like I tell them, like, I got like an hour or two from like 10 to noon that we need no work done. And like today, the guy's like, "Oh, we'll do drywall. We'll be quiet." And I'm like, "Well, okay, what are you going to do?" But hey, shout out K-Gun Girl. People are waking up to the truth. That is so true. And I got to tell this story too, Todd, just about how pervasive it is, people waking up. My buddy Jim, he watches the show. We've been friends 25 years. I've talked about him on here before. He watches the show. He gets mad at Todd sometimes because Todd goes even further than I do, which is crazy. But he invited Todd to family lunch. Like, so Todd, we got to set up a Saturday where you can join us at the Pizza Ranch for lunch. But so Jim, after the election, we got together a few weeks ago, and you know, he was kind of down in the dumps about Trump and oh, I can't believe they beat Kamala and all this, and Project 2025 was really bothering him. And I just look at him and go, like, you're a smart guy. I tell you all the time, like, go read it. The media's lying to you. I do a show called Freedom from the Press, where the whole premise for an hour and a half is us telling you how the media is lying to you. Think for yourself, you know, actually read the stuff. And so Todd, he lined up a gotcha. Because you know what that son of a gun did? He went out and he brought a copy of Project 2025. 900 pages. He got it sent to the house after our lunch. He was so mad at me because he was going to show me how bad it was. He's a third of the way in, so he's like 300 pages in. We were texting the other day after we had Cenk Uygur on the Wayne Dupree show, and so I sent him that, and we were talking about that. He goes, "Okay, I hate to admit, after our last conversation, I was going to show you, so I ordered Project 2025. And I'm a third of the way through. Trump's been mentioned like 3-4 times. And honestly, most everything in there I agree with." And I'm like, wait a second. And he's like, "Yeah, I was going to prove you wrong. So I ordered the book." I'm like, "You're going to read a 900-page book to tell me I'm wrong." And I told you were wrong because I had read a lot of it. And now you're telling me that you're reading it and yeah, it turned out you were lied to. So guys like my buddy Jim are all over out there. So we need to be a little, I don't want to say sensitive to our Democrat friends, but they're where Republicans were in 2015, 16, where we all thought Mitt Romney was a great guy or John McCain was a great guy. And then Trump showed us how awful and corrupt they were. And our brains were breaking like, holy cow, he's right. That's what Democrats are going through right now. It's pretty spectacular.
Yeah, 100%. You know what that makes me think of, Jason? The moral of that story is when they get confronted with the truth, they start to go through a process of self-reflection. And to the theme of the show today, corporate media is in a free fall because we're going to play the clip of Jasmine Crocket. And it says the quiet part out loud, like we rely on corporate media to spread the message that we desire so we can retain power. But newsflash, that message isn't true. Your buddy Jim, kudos to him. Jim, thanks for taking that on yourself. Thanks for doing your own homework. But he saw the truth. He agreed with the truth. And now he's going to be less susceptible in the future to believing all these media lies. And that's what they're so afraid of. That's why corporate media is dying, because more and more people are waking up to the truth. I got to get to this comment, Jason. Albert writes, thanks for watching over on Facebook. Albert, if you want to continue to watch the show, we always do we continue on at Rumble. Check out the Rumble app at the American Tribune. But where's the media content to support your platform? We're all over the place. You can find us on Rumble at the American Tribune. You can go to our daily news website, theamericantribune.com. I've got a separate Rumble channel where I go on live Tuesdays and Thursdays. That's the American Tribune Live with Todd Peterson. We've got a Substack, theamericantribune.news. We're all over the internet. We've got Facebook pages, X accounts. You can find Jason at JRob from Minnesota, me at Todd Amtrib. But thanks for the question. Thanks for looking at how to support the show. And if you want to get a hat like I've got, a hat like Jason's got, I don't have the mug today, but we got lots of other stuff at the AmericanTribuneStore.com. The AmericanTribuneStore.com. Get some merch. We don't make a lot of money off of it, but if you want to support the cause, wear a hat out in public, drink your coffee out of one of our mugs, check it out.
Yeah, and I got to say, thanks to my wife, she shouted out I had the microphone wrong. Hopefully I sound a little better, folks. Technology, I'm a boomer, right? But I'm wondering too if Albert's question was more, can you prove they're lying? Which I'm kind of hoping it is, because if he's a first-time viewer to the show, dude, we are going to play you the clips, show you receipts, show you here's the facts. I mean, we went way back. Like if you go back in the time machine, like when they were talking about the book banning in Florida, we actually pulled up the legislation and read it on the show. The book banning in Florida was how do we prevent pornography from getting in schools? And like you could read, like we go back to the source material whenever we can. You won't see us citing Fox News unless it's playing like video clip or something from a full interview. We try to be respectful in our edits. And I'll be honest, we're very critical of Republicans too. We think establishment Republicans are just as bad as Democrats. So.
Check out last week's show. It was an hour and a half on Joni Ernst.
Right, yeah. Oh, man, and we got Paul Reese checking in from cold Minnesota.
Cheers, Paul.
I got my cup of Split Rock Coffee, splitrockcoffee.com. Use promo code
Todd10. Subscribe and save. Get delicious, fresh ground coffee delivered to your doorstep every month. splitrockcoffee.com. Support a disabled veteran-owned company. Right up where we all are. Jason and I are broadcasting from Minnesota. It is, I think it's in the negatives right now. It is cold outside.
It is. Oh my gosh. And one last shout out. Fally, one of the originals. Our day is not complete till Fally says good morning to us. Fally, thanks for joining.
Oh, and Jason, I want to give a special shout out. We got the American Debunk in the chat today, watching over on Facebook. Folks, theamericandebunk.com, or let us know in the comments below there, American Debunk. Fantastic resource. We have cited it before. I did a 2-hour, 2.5-hour episode on my channel debunking all the Trump hoaxes. One guy, one wrecking ball, has compiled all of the media Trump hoaxes in one website. It tells you what the hoax was, how they propagated it, how it gets debunked if you're willing to accept the truth. Fantastic resource. He was inspired. I think you did it on your own, and then Scott Adams was talking on his own show on Rumble. We got to have a resource so folks can see all these Trump hoaxes get debunked in real time. The American Debunk had that idea already, followed by Scott Adams, promoted by Scott Adams. Check out the site, AmericanDebunk.com. Great resource to share with all your normie Democrat friends, because once they see that one hoax is debunked, they got to ask the question, what else have they been lying about?
You know, it's funny you said that, and then we can get to the Jasmine Crocket quote, but I was having this online argument on the Twitter with somebody about the Ukraine war. And I said, well, since World War II, what military conflict should we have been involved in? Were we the right side of? Like Vietnam, like if I were alive, I would have been on the make peace, not war side. You know, were you? Yeah. Okay, Korea, the Middle East, Afghanistan. I grew up in the let's go blow up a Middle Eastern country for oil phase of the 90s and 2000s. And he's like, yep. And I'm like, and how many times did the government lie to you about, the cause? Like, let's go back to, the predicates to many of these conflicts, from weapons of mass destruction to the Gulf of Tonkin. And they're like, oh yeah, no, those are things. I'm like, okay, so every time since World War II, pretty much you can say, yeah, the government duped us into doing something we shouldn't have done. And this is the one you believe them on.
I think I got to save my other comments on that point, Jason, for Rumble. Remind me, I'll revisit some of the things I want to say on Rumble. One more shout out, and then we're going to get to our first clip of the day. Yeah, you might have been correct. Albert was probably asking for sources, because all the leftists always go, source, what's your source? But shout out to Francis. Thanks for tuning in today over on Rumble. Francis, Fally, we got Paul, we got Kagan Girl. They're all watching over on Rumble at the American Tribune channel. So folks, if you're watching on Facebook, thanks for joining. We get tons of comments, tons of views on Facebook, but head over to the American Tribune channel on Rumble. That is where we try to build a platform, and that's where we do some special content at the tail end that we can't talk about on some of these other big tech platforms.
Yeah, and I got to say, just a preview for the Rumble only part, we got to dive into this January 6th release from the last couple days. and show you in real time how the media tries to promulgate a hoax. It's amazing.
It is amazing. But without further ado, let us go to the headline of the show. Here is your source. Corporate media is a free fall as Dem admits the quiet part out loud. They can't win without a little help from propaganda. I didn't say it. Representative Jasmine Crocket said it. Here we go.
Why do you think Democrats lost, and what do you think needs to happen by the midterms and the next presidential election in order to find your footing again?
Well, Kristen, no disrespect to you. I think you do great work. But the reality is that those that tune in to traditional news sources, they absolutely went for us. And we know that the standards that you have to live by as an actual journalist are completely different from other platforms. And so we know that we were winning for those that were tuning into the traditional news sources. But when it came down to people getting their news from places that really aren't even news sources, they were going for Donald Trump by 19 points. And that is exactly why we lost. The reality is that we're going to have to play in spaces that we've never had to play and make sure that we're communicating in all ways. Unfortunately, we can't just rely on the mainstream media to get our message across.
So much to unpack.
First of all, can I just say, without being called a racist, that this woman is an embarrassment that she serves in Congress. Now, she is a black woman, so somebody's going to call me misogynistic or racist, but I guess I'll have to live with that. Congress should be full of some of our most impressive people. We did not send our best in this case.
I don't even know where to begin. I'm going to go back to the first thing she said here. Let me see if I can rewind it.
In the next in order to find your footing again.
Well, Kristen, no disrespect to you. I think you do great work. But the reality is that.
All right. So part one, I think you do great work. And again, we live in two completely different worlds. Those of us on the screen right now, those of you following along, we all look at corporate media and we say, what an atrocious job you have done lying on behalf of the government, slandering the American people. So right there, she's already lying, and we haven't even gotten into the meat of her argument here.
Those that tune in to traditional news sources, they absolutely went for us. And we.
All right. And that is why we titled the show that we did today, People That Watch Corporate Media. Notice she's using delicate words like traditional media, mainstream media. Folks that watch these programs, CNN, MSNBC, even Fox News to an extent. I mean, you got Paul Ryan on the board of Fox, outside of Tucker before he left and Gutfeld and maybe one or two others. Like, sorry, folks, Fox is also corporate media. If you watch those cable news networks, you vote Democrat. And I wonder why. I wonder why. What were they saying about Donald Trump for the last 10 years? What have they said about you, the America First Movement supporters, for the last 10 years?
Well, yeah, and it's fascinating, too, because I like how she calls it corporate media. And I think the word selection there is a very powerful word selection. I think large corporations are the devil. I think these big corporations screw over American citizens. They ruin small business. They don't make it. They have a place in society. But when your entire country, and you look at what happened in shall not be named time on some platforms in 2020, 2021, how these big corporations just pillaged mom and pop small businesses. Will Tanner wrote a piece on the American Tribune.news. I think it was like in the 1930s. Don't quote me on that. Like 60% of Americans were self-employed, and now it's less than 10. And we are dependent on the corporations. This just in, folks. Your Democrat friends in 2015 felt the same way you did, that corporate was bad, these big corporations. And why are they bad? The corporations, even Fox News, CNN, and MSNBC, they get all their money from other corporations, big advertisers, and they're not going to do investigative journalism or reporting on their same advertisers. Think back to Big Tobacco. There was a time in America, Big Tobacco gave advertising money to newspapers and television programs and radio programs. They gave money to doctors, and they paid them all. And the understanding with them was you don't report on the bad things about tobacco. You just talk about the good stuff. You endorse it. And that came out. It was a huge scandal. We're like, holy cow, Big Tobacco, like they bought off the politicians, the media, the doctors, everybody. This isn't like a conspiracy theory. This really happened. And now we see it happening in real time. And people don't understand that the same thing's happening with this big corporation. So she's flat out admitting that the Democrat Party is a party of corporations, and they're on the take just as much as everybody else. And that used to be the Republican Party of 2010, 2015, you know.
Yeah, I mean, big tobacco. I'll go back a couple years ago, and you were watching all these, let's use her words, traditional media reporting on things that made us sick. And you looked into who was funding all of these corporate media outlets, and it was Big Pharma. And you wondered why no one was allowed to ask questions on corporate media.
Right. Wait. You mean the corporate media is not going to investigate their biggest advertisers?
Gosh, I'm shocked.
Todd, you keep it up. I'm going to grab my tinfoil hat. Like, now you're talking crazy.
Oh, boy.
You know that the standards that you have to live by as an actual journalist.
The fact that she said, there was so much to unpack, like I said, the standards that a corporate media journalist has to abide by. Actually, Jason, I'm proud of this. This is like the highlight of my day when someone big on X replies to me. I was speaking to Michael Malice on X. And by speaking, I mean, I commented on one of his tweets and he responded to me. I don't think stupidity explains this anymore. And Malice agreed with me. And Malice said the same thing. There's nothing stupid about this argument. She knows this is a lie. It is pure malevolence. And so when she's telling you, you guys have integrity, you follow standards, nobody believes that. Nobody. What standards have they demonstrated to have in the last however many decades? This is pure propaganda coming out of her mouth right there.
Well, and especially we talk a lot about the Fine People hoax because it's the easiest debunked and it's the tentpole hoax, right? Like it was the hoax that started all hoaxes. All those journalists saw the extended version where President Trump said, I'm not talking about white supremacists. They all saw it. They all knew it existed. They chose to keep getting on the media, taking their paycheck and lying. So yeah, this bull crap she said about your integrity or whatnot. Screw you. I'm fired up. It's a Split Rock coffee, Todd. I shifted to a lighter roast that has more caffeine in it. And like between that and the painkillers for my kidney stone, like boom, I'm ready to go.
Jason, how many folks realize that the lighter the roast, the more caffeine there is? I think people are like, oh, dark coffee, I got to stay away from that. But you know what, folks, the longer you roast it.
Yeah, actually, that's a great point. Paul Reese taught me that. It's spectacular. Oh, and shout out to Paul too. He's watching with his 87-year-old dad. His dad's had some rough go of it for a bit here. So prayers to his dad.
Are completely different from other platforms. And so we know that we were winning for those that were tuning into the traditional news sources.
There it is. If you turn off the television, if you understand the media lies to you, game over for Democrats, a game over for the corporate media outlets, because the only way Democrats win is if they can capture people's minds and get them plugged into CNN, MSNBC. You've got some social media teams out there as well. It is astounding. We all see it. We all know it. Heck, these people are even admitting it too, which is why it's so important for you folks to share the program, expose your friends like you did, Jason, your buddy, Project 2025. You don't have to agree with all of it. You just have to understand that you've been lied to about how you're supposed to view things, how you're supposed to interpret what you see with your own eyes.
Yeah, well, yeah, and it's funny too. I got to admit, I admitted this on the Way Dupree podcast, Todd, and I'm a little ashamed. I've started watching a little CNN and MSNBC just because it's cratering, and not a ton, just like, a half hour here and there. And it is like delusional level. I mean, these people just, and I'm sitting there because my dad, God love my dad, but he sits there and he watches those platforms all day long. And I'm like, and so it's hard to talk to him. Like he lives in an entirely different reality than I do. It's bizarre.
Yeah, and they're only doubling down. This is what is insane. They're so beholden to, it's a religious worldview. If you're a progressive Democrat at this point, if you're on the left, like that is your religion. But they've doubled down. They refuse to acknowledge why they lost this last election so resoundingly. And for us folks, like, yes, we supported Donald Trump, but we're not blindly partisan. Like, we support Donald Trump because he's doing good things. It's not because we're in some MAGA cult like they'll accuse us of doing. It is not hard to see why Donald Trump won the election. Economy, border, foreign wars. We're done with all the lying, like people saw through the media, despite having all the billions of dollars pumped into the Harris campaign, the entire support of the media surrogacy. Donald Trump won because we just see right through it. It's not a hard calculation if you can take off your partisan hat, but these people are so blinded by their fervent religious zealotry that they're like, oh, well, that's because people are getting misinformation over on X. That's because, they're not as enlightened as we are. And it's like, nope, it's not that tough, guys. People are done with your lies. That's it. And they want policies that enable them to have more freedom and prosperity. That is it. That's the end of the discussion. I don't want to help Democrats by saying that, but it's so obvious and they refuse to accept it.
And it's funny, too, because Democrats, it's like they think the world stops if, like, the federal government's not there. Like, my life doesn't change. You know what I mean? If the government shut down, like, there are more federal holidays than anybody, and, like, life still goes on, right?
Yeah, we were trying to find a speaker last year. We didn't have Congress do anything for 3 weeks. It was a fantastic 3 weeks. Shoot, right. We didn't have an acting president the last 4 years. I mean, we had a large federal government, but not a president that was cognizant. Like, like you said, Jason, when we all used to have farms or small businesses, we didn't need all this bureaucracy to lord over us. People functioned. People functioned just fine without government. And he's going to abolish. I played a clip on my podcast yesterday. Linda McMahon kind of asked walking down the hallway, what's your game plan with education? She's like, we're going to give states more power. Now, people are looking into that comment and saying, is he going to abolish the federal Department of Education? And the left is going to freak out. I hope he does. He should. He should abolish a lot of these agencies. And they're going to freak out. They're going to be like, oh, no, how are kids going to learn? And it's like, folks, you have state-level Department of Education. You still pay way too much money on property taxes to fund your local school. Like, they aren't going anywhere, unfortunately. Like, when Jason said I'm more radical than he is, I want them all gone. But the reality is it still goes back to the states, just like the issue of abortion. Abortion rights didn't disappear. They just got pushed back to the states. The same thing will happen with education. We don't need all this federal government.
It's funny. People just think they need big daddy government. Let's continue on with Jasmine.
All right.
I feel brain cells melting as we watch her.
I can't believe people vote for this. Like, I expect her to be this stupid because she's in Congress. She has to say what she needs to say to get funding. But, like, then you look at the voters and, like, you thought this was a good idea? At some point, we got to blame voters because she's not there without the majority vote in her district.
Right.
But when it came down to people getting their news from places that really aren't even news sources, they were going for Donald Trump by 19 points. And that is exactly why we lost. The reality is that we're going to have to play in spaces that we've never had to play and make sure that we're communicating in all ways.
I'm going to jump in again, Jason. I'll let you comment on that as well. When she says we need to communicate better, I notice what she didn't say. It's the stuff that they leave out. She's not talking about maybe we need to formulate better policies that Americans agree with. Maybe we need to represent the American people and meet them where they're at. She is not concerned with enacting policies that make your life better. She's concerned about how do we message people about our communist plans to crush your freedom, but in a way that is softened or in a way that gets you outraged over Donald Trump's next thing. None of this interview is about how can we make life better for Americans. We care about the American people. It is all about how do we control messaging.
And that's what's funny. Like, none of this is why did you lose? Because Americans' lives got worse over the last 4 years. Like, this is it. Why did Joe Biden lose other than Kamala lose? Like, Joe Biden's brain went to Jello, which it was Jello in 2020. Kamala Harris was the least impressive presidential candidate of our lifetime. And the fact is, everybody watching this podcast, unless you're an illegal immigrant, your life got worse in the last 4 years. Your taxes went up, your civil liberties went down, prices went up. And that's why we rejected you. Which, Todd, to bring an aside, and we should make a poll or put it in the chat. In your lifetime, is Kamala Harris the least impressive presidential candidate ever for a major party? Like the nominee, not saying somebody who said they were going to run for president, but I mean, I was looking back. We had that debate on Wayne Show, and he's like, "Oh, Dan Quayle wasn't smart," and then I'm like, "Well, Dan Quayle didn't run for president; he was vice president." And Dan Quayle wasn't the sharpest knife in the drawer, but man, Kamala Harris just was not.
Well, and she was bad in every way you look at it. Like, I can deal with less intelligent folks if they're like, I know I'm not the brightest. I think American people can make decisions for themselves. I'm going to get government out of the way. I can live with that. But it was the combination of her low IQ and her policy positions, like all of it summed up. I mean, Jason, spoiler alert, I think she was the worst candidate we've ever seen. Just every way you slice it, like whatever angle you want to take on Kamala Harris, bad.
Right. Hey, I got to give a shout out to Myrtle too. Myrtle Larson. The art of indoctrination and propaganda, stupid is the stupid dumb. Dems have succumbed to radical ideology and lost all credibility by their constant lies. That's a really well said. And your Democrat friends are going through it. And once again, I say it on the show, like, I'm not talking about all Democrats. Like my buddy Jim, who's a Democrat, he's waking up. He's like, man, they've lied to us. And they're still blue-haired cat ladies that no matter what you say, they're going to believe what the government says. But it just blows my mind, if even this interview, that like corporate media, like Democrats used to think corporations were corrupt. They used to think government was corrupt. Like, how did this happen? Like, I used to be a conservative and I didn't like the Republican Party because I'm like, you're owned by big corporations, you're screwing Americans over. So it was hard to align with the Republicans. But now, like, it's the Democrats. They did the switcheroo.
Unfortunately, we can't just rely on the mainstream media to get our message across.
Why?
Again, it's all about messaging. And you know what? Credit to the American people. I'll rag on voters sometimes. I'm like, how do you vote for this person? Like Kentucky, how do you vote for McConnell? Utah, how do you vote for Romney? Like, I'll rag on voters all day long. But at the same time, it's not a single issue problem. It's these folks that just lie to you. And you know what? Most Americans, they got to go to work. They got to raise a family. They're driving their kids to soccer practice. People are busy. They're not tuned into politics like Jason and I are for our job. And so, yeah, you turn on the news. You were raised to believe sources of authority. And we got to break that cycle. But you're just like, all right, they're saying this about Trump. At some point, it has to be true. Like, how can all these things about Donald Trump not be true? And they're like, okay, it's enough. I just believe it. Fine, I believe him. But it's all about messaging. It's not about policies. And people finally woke up. They're like, they're telling me the economy's good. This job report, they're telling me it looks good. But I'm looking around. I'm struggling to buy a house. I'm struggling to pay for groceries. At some point, the messaging, it just doesn't work anymore because we see through the lies.
That's right.
Speaking of lies, Jason, I wasn't planning on playing this clip, but it kind of ties in nicely to what we're talking about here. This is my go-to for Kamala.
140 law enforcement officers were injured that day. Law enforcement officers were killed that day.
Referencing, of course, the event we're going to talk about on our Rumble-only section. This was like a week before the election. Like, you talk about them just pushing lies. Charlottesville, Biden launched his 2020 campaign on the Charlottesville hoax. Kamala Harris was out there the entire cycle. Charlottesville, this and that, fine people. And then she's out there saying that police officers died on January 6th. Like, these are provably false. Provably false. And the New York Times admitted it, even though they broke the lying story in the first place. And then she's out there because her voters still believe it too.
And it's funny. So just to compare contrast, because we don't have a clip on this, but like right now, one of the things the mainstream media is trying to run with, Donald Trump was asked about lowering prices, and he gave an answer where he said, it's going to be hard to lower prices, inflation's tough, rah, 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 rah. And then the rest of the quote was, but I think if we unleash energy and do this, that, and the other thing, it's going to bring prices down. It might take a little time. I can't guarantee anything. Like, we're going to do the best we can to bring prices down, which is all a factually true statement. But the media is coming out and they're reporting just the first part of the sentence where Trump said it's going to be hard to bring prices down. And then the headline is Donald Trump can't promise to bring prices down, even though he did in the election. So here you got Kamala Harris the week before the election telling a flat out verifiable lie. This is 100% false. And the news media just like, oh, I didn't see nothing. And you got Donald Trump telling a truth, which is it's going to be hard to lower prices. Like, step one, let's stop inflation. Let's stop prices from going up. Step two, let's try to lower prices. And he's being honest with the American people. This is going to be a battle. And you have the media like, he won't promise he can lower prices. And like, seriously, because if he said, yep, I'm going to bring prices down, and then the first time prices went up, the news media would have said, oh, Donald Trump lied to you. He promised he was going to do this. Like, folks, everybody knows, nobody knows what the outcome of any of this is. We're going to hire smart people and hope they do good things.
Yeah, speaking of inflation, too, you want to talk about media not covering truthfully. Remember when we get KJP out there in the last year and she says, we're bringing inflation down. Inflation is down. And they're looking at the snapshot of like from May to June. Yeah, inflation rate might have gone down from 5 to 4% or whatever it was. But then instead of saying like inflation went down, how about we look at inflation from when Biden took office to current present day rates, yeah, inflation went down in the last month, but in the last 4 years, inflation is up 30%, and that is now baked into the price of everything.
And, so and inflation is down is so funny too, because what they're really saying in English is prices continue going up. They went up again this month. They just went up less than they did last month. Like, but people don't know what that sentence even means. That's why you watch shows like Freedom from the Press podcast. We explain to you that when they say inflation went down, they're technically telling the truth, but they're lying to you. They're telling the truth. The rate of the increase of prices going up slowed down, but they still went up.
And that is the formula, kernel of truth to obfuscate a larger lie. That is the playbook every single time.
Oh my gosh. Where do we go next, Todd? Do we go Pete Hegseth?
Okay, we're 37 minutes in. We only got to the first clip. Let us dive in now here. First world problem. We got too many video files open. I really wanted to, do you want to get into Duke right now, Jason, or do you want to continue the trend of some other current stories here?
I kind of want to hit Pete Hegseth because I think this is a good one. And I don't know if we have a video for it.
So I've got Geraldo talking about it, and then we can do some screen sharing if you want.
Yeah. So to give people the history of the Pete Hegseth. So my opinion is Pete Hegseth, if you look at the military structure, we have a lot of veterans that watch the show. Thank you for your service. I'm going to get the terms wrong of the military because I never served myself. But you reach a high enough level in the military where you become a senior officer, and that tends to be where people go through all the indoctrination, where you have to be a sellout. As a general statement, a lot of like the rank and file military members don't really like the officers. They do all the DEI stuff, that kind of thing. President Trump tapped Pete Hegseth. Pete Hegseth served honorably. He was a combat veteran. Since he got out of the military, he has served in doing veterans charity work. And he's been a commentator on Fox. He's from Minnesota. Shout out Pete Hegseth. So really good guy. And if you look at the military, what Hutch Bailey Jr. used to be on the Wayne Dupree podcast, he always talked about, you got to go down 4 levels, fire them all. And then you're going to be left with maybe some less experienced leaders, but you'll get some people that you can move in there. And so Pete Hegseth, Donald Trump tapped for him. And Pete Hegseth's platforms are, we need to get all the junk out of the military. We need to make it the most efficient killing machine ever. That's all we need to worry about. We need to be efficient. We need to really look at the role women play. Should they be in active combat? They can be in the military, but I don't know if they belong in the foxhole next to the man in live combat. Some good conversations we need to have. But more importantly, it's we need to deploy the military when we're going to take somebody out and not be police officers. The military industrial complex, the rhinos, everybody hates him. And they've done everything they can since Trump nominated him to discredit him, to tear him down, to not support his nomination. Is that a pretty good summation, Todd?
Yeah, and the 2 lies they were pushing was a drinking problem. And look, we've got Kamala Harris right on our screen here. Lots of rumors swirled around her ability to remain sober throughout the day. And again, Facebook, I don't know, allegations, rumors.
She looks shit-faced to me, Todd, but it's just my opinion.
I have my own opinions about it as well. But you see the face of the Democrat presidential nominee, and we had all these stories coming around. Nobody touched it. It wasn't a problem. And now Pete Hegseth, drinking. He likes to do podcasts and a sip of whiskey sometimes. And then the other story was with a 2017 encounter with a woman that by all accounts appears to be a married woman's regret because she was at the same hotel that she slept with Hegseth that her husband was at, never returned to her hotel room. A couple of days later, comes up with the story that it was not consensual. She was saying that I was just defending all the other women down at the bar, and I brought Hegseth back to his room to look out for other women. Oh, and then, by the way, something happened. So they're trying to attack him on these 2 fronts. And then the latest bombshell of how the media just straight up lies is that he was asked about West Point. He applied to get into the Naval Academy, and he was like, look, I applied and I didn't go. And the media ran some fake story about that's not true. He got denied. He didn't want to go there. And boy, oh boy, do we have some screenshots to share about that insane story that, again, X debunked right away. If it were not for X, an independent journalist, the same people Jasmine Crocket was railing against, people would have been believing this lie that is so easily disproven because there would be no forms of alternate media.
Well, and actually, this is really the theme of the show, and this is why I wanted to talk about this. So Pete Hegseth made reference to applying and being accepted to West Point back like 5-6 years ago. So these journalists, I'm doing it in air quotes, they actually went back to old interviews to dig up about him saying he went to West Point. Okay. So then they're fact checking. Was he telling the truth? This wasn't like last week. He said, yeah, I got accepted to West Point. These were old interviews. So these reporters are going through old interviews and finding out he claimed he got accepted to West Point. So they contact West Point and said, hey, did Pete Hegseth ever get accepted? Pete Hegseth says, or West Point says no. They contact West Point again, the media, and they say, are you guys sure he says he did? Nope, that's incorrect. West Point then the media sends Pete Hegseth a note giving him like an hour to respond, and Libs of TikTok broke this story. And I can't can you read the email that they sent him, Todd?
Now let's go back to this one here. Let's see, how's that looking on our screen?
Oh, yeah, pretty good. Is it clear on yours where you can read it? Or you want
I can read this one. So it says, this is Justin Elliott from ProPublica. This is the left-wing hack organization that tried to tarnish Hegseth again. I'm reaching out with an urgent request for comment for your client, Pete Hegseth. We're moving quickly, so please let me know if you or he would like to comment as soon as possible. Our deadline is in 1 hour. 1 hour. I can be reached at, and then email is redacted. Email redacted. We're preparing a story about Mr. Hegseth's claim that he was admitted to West Point. The school told us that is not true. According to a spokesperson for the school, Mr. Hegseth did not even apply. Mr. Hegseth said on Jason Chaffetz's podcast in June, I got into West Point. I mentioned West Point. I got into Princeton also, and I went to visit those two schools and ultimately decided on Princeton. He repeated the claim in September and again in October. Why did Mr. Hegseth say he got into West Point when that is not true? This is the ProPublica journalist asking those questions. How can Mr. Hegseth be Secretary of Defense given that he has made false statements about getting into the military's most prestigious academy? Is there anything else we should know? So let's
unpack this. They're citing these podcasts from June and August, whenever they're digging through his stuff. We did a whole episode breaking down Tim Walz's stolen valor and how he lied. And like these guys are going to go to any lengths to discredit Pete Hegseth. And then look at that crap the media does. We send you an email and, hey, you got an hour to reply. Like, are you kidding me? Like, I don't know if you guys realize, but Pete Hegseth's kind of busy. He might not be sitting on his email just waiting for ProPublica to send it to him.
You make a great point too, Jason. Remember when all the Tim Walz stuff came out? Hey, you lied about the rank. Hey, you lied about, serving in combat. Hey, you lied about this. Where was, what's this fool's name again? Probably, it doesn't matter. His name is Justin. They're all the same. They're all hack journalists. Where was this, let's say, investigative integrity, to use Jasmine Crockett's words, to go after these stories about Tim Walz, who by all accounts committed stolen valor, did far worse than Pete Hegseth? Even if Hegseth lied about getting into West Point, that pales into comparison to the lies Tim Walz told about serving in command, about, I forget even the rank, retired command sergeant major, which is just not true. I don't remember them going after Tim Walz at all, but boy, it seems like it's convenient that Hegseth is nominated by Trump. So now we're curious about military lies.
Right. Oh, hey, and shout out, Dee made it.
Dee in the chat. Over at Rumble, the American Tribune.
You stopping in, so thanks for joining us. But yeah, so then, and they actually ran this story. So they gave an hour. They start leaking this out. The media, this got shared with a few other media organizations because they all kind of collude behind the scenes, like, hey, we're all going to go after this guy. And they shared the stuff. And then all of a sudden, the ultimate debunk happens. Todd, how did it get debunked?
So here we go. I'm going to read Libs of TikTok now. It says, this is a pretty big scandal. Yeah, understatement. West Point lied and said Hegseth had even applied when a journal reached out asking about his acceptance. Hegseth responded to the journal with evidence of his acceptance, so they didn't publish. They didn't either publish that West Point lied. They didn't publish either. I think there's a typo there. Now West Point is saying it was a mistake and they didn't properly search their records. How does such a high-profile damning mistake happen? Why didn't the journalist, and these are in air quotes, publish the scandal of West Point lying? Is someone at West Point purposely trying to sabotage Pete Hegseth? And then you can see in some of these tweets here from Hegseth, I don't know if the image is going to show up here. He's actually, Pete Hegseth on X shared his acceptance letter into West Point. And he writes, we understand that ProPublica, the left-wing hack group, is planning to publish a knowingly false report that I was not accepted to West Point in 1999. Here's my letter of acceptance signed by West Point Superintendent Lieutenant General Daniel Chrisman, U.S. Army. And so at the very bottom of the screen, I don't know. Yeah, it is showing up a little bit. You can see his acceptance letter. And then
putting this out in real time, they're digging through old podcasts to find a claim he went to West Point. They go to fact check him on that when they didn't fact check anything any Democrat said ever. Why did West Point lie? Now we got a real story, right? If you're a real journalist, aren't you going like, wait a second, is there some, why did you guys lie to us? Because on the email chain, like they asked like 3-4 times, like, you're sure? Like, because he said he has, that kind of thing. And I heard, and I don't know if it's true, but it was like Pete Hegseth's mom kept the letter because she was so proud of it. And had they not kept the letter from, I forget the date on it, it's like 25 years ago, this lie would have taken off and all the media would have reported on is Pete Hegseth, stolen valor. He lied about getting into West Point. And I can just imagine Amy Klobuchar from Minnesota in his hearing, and she'll probably have, Joni Ernst helping her, like, why did you lie about getting into West Point? Where Pete Hegseth is like, are you kidding me? And now, journalists, you have a real story. Why did West Point screw up? Was it intentional or was it just an egregious error? And if it was an error, somebody should be fired. Like, if you are contacted about a presidential nominee to run the Department of Defense, like, you have a little responsibility to make sure you're accurately reporting, right?
Well, Jason, is it stupidity or malevolence? I think I have made up my mind when all these mistakes miraculously only ever happen in one direction. At some point, if it was accidental, the error would go the other way. I am inclined to believe that there was some nefarious activity within West Point. Maybe some drone was just following orders. Hey, do not release this document. But it is there. I don't think it'd be that hard to search records to find acceptance letters. But make no mistake, Jason, I'm calling it now. I think this comes up in his confirmation hearing because Democrat voters, the same people that Jasmine Crocket was celebrating, hey, they believe us when we get on corporate media and lie to them. Some Democrat senator is going to bring this up because they are going to play to their base and get their little soundbite in there, get their dig on Hegseth. You lied about getting into West Point. I'm calling it now. Someone is going to be that, not stupid, malevolent.
Oh my God. You know what? You just blew my mind, Todd. I hadn't even thought of that, but you're right, folks. Continue watching the Freedom from the Press podcast because in the Pete Hegseth hearing, Todd was the first, mark it down,
number one,
first prediction, December 13th. Todd predicted that even though it's a debunked hoax, that some idiot Democrat is going to make a soundbite. Oh my God. And I can just go through the list of all the Democrats that are going to retweet it. Like Harry Stisson on Twitter, he's going to be like, Pete Hegseth lied. And, it'll be Jasmine Crocket. Like, she'll be, or the guy that thought Guam was going to tip over. Like, it'll be one of those clowns. It'll be like, why did you lie about getting into West Point? Everybody's going to look at him like he's a retard. Oh, dang
but
it.
They don't care about that because they know they can blast that clip on their own social media and say, Pete Hegseth, stolen valor, Donald Trump. And they're going to get all their buzzwords in there. Jason, I 100% believe this is going to happen. We're going to have to comment when the Hegseth hearings take place.
Oh my gosh. I'm writing it down. So when we make predictions or bets, I just write it down on my little high-tech sheet, and then I refer back to it. Like, it started back on one of our early episodes where we were like, we had already decided like a year and a half ago Joe Biden wouldn't be the nominee, and we were predicting who the nominee would be. So the media were surprised and shocked Joe Biden backed out, but viewers of the Freedom from the Press podcast, we all do 2 years ago.
And do Democrat voters ever ask, hey, how did you guys know that? Or what information did you have that would give you that idea to make such a bold hypothesis? They never ask how we know or what we're thinking. They don't care. Whatever they get plugged in their brain that day by corporate media, that's good enough for them.
Yeah, it's like Todd watches C-SPAN. He does a lot of video editing for our website, and he's like, this guy is not there.
Let's see. He's not there. Polls aren't favorable. He's outlived his utility for the machine. Yes. He will be gone.
He will be gone.
All right.
So this Pete Hegseth story, prime example of a hoax trying to take off. Thank God for X because they shut it down. Thank God he kept this letter from 20 some years ago. Otherwise, the media would have ran with it. Even though, like Todd said, even if he lied about that, like, is that really the worst lie a politician had? Like, we just saw Tim Walz lie about his rank and nobody cared. So suddenly you're going to care that Pete Hegseth lied about a college he got accepted into? Like, get out of here. And that brings up a good point, too, that I think we need to understand is that Democrats try to hold Republicans or conservatives to one standard. Meanwhile, they hold themselves to a different. And like, to be honest, I would rather every politician that lied be got rid of, right? Like, that's my thing. But if we're only going to get rid of Republicans when they lie, like, that's a defeating prophecy. And I was chatting with somebody about it, especially as it related to like the law enforcement stuff, because everybody's like, Trump's going to weaponize government to go after his political opponents. And you know what? I do not expect Donald Trump to go after the crazy cat lady across the road from me who was doing a protest, a pro-abortion protest in front of a church. I do not expect Donald Trump to go after her, right? I do expect Donald Trump to go after the people that prosecuted the person who was protesting in front of an abortion clinic and got arrested and charged, because that person who chose to go after the Catholic who was protesting abortion, that person belongs in jail. All the January 6 people that tried to ruin President Trump and lied to everybody, they deserve to be prosecuted. Fannie Willis going after President Trump, she deserves to be prosecuted. We need to hold them to the same standard that they set for President Trump, because if we don't hold them accountable, they're not going to stop. They're just going to do it next time. Like, they'll behave for a couple of years till they get power again, and then they're just going to do the same damn thing.
Yeah, I did a video response on our main channel here. You guys can find the video when the podcast is on. Donald Trump was asked in that NBC interview at one point, should Joe Biden pardon all these guys? Ray, Cheney, Pelosi. And he looked at him and he's like, he probably should pardon them. And that wasn't to say that he thinks they deserve a pardon, but I think Donald Trump is getting the gears of the machine in motion. Like, these guys committed crimes. And if Joe Biden doesn't do them a solid, guess what? I got Kash Patel in the FBI. I got Pam Bondi in the AG role. I'm going after them. I am going after them. So yes, Joe Biden should pardon them. And it was a little tongue in cheek, but I think we know where the Trumpster stands on this. Jason, this is completely irrelevant to our conversation, but when you were talking about applying the same principles, I'm always reminded Frank Herbert's quote in The Children of Dune. When I am weaker than you, I ask you for freedom because that is according to your principles. When I am stronger than you, I take away your freedom because that is according to my principles. We are playing two separate games here. No compromise with these folks. There needs to be accountability. Otherwise, when the tables turn, right now they're calling for unity. They're saying, oh no, let bygones be bygones. Absolutely not. They have set the rules. We need to play by those rules. Otherwise, they will crush us when they get back into power.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting because there was always kind of that political version of mutually assured destruction. Like, part of the reason why Russia and the United States never blew each other up is because both knew that if the war started, they would both be destroyed. And at some point, the Republican Party became a spineless party that just let Democrats do whatever. And it's funny, like in Minnesota, as soon as Democrats got one more vote over the line, they did every radical policy they could, right? They didn't need even a big majority or 60 or 70%. They needed 51%, and they canned every single conservative thing in Minnesota. That's how these radicals work. But Republicans, like, they'll get 51% and they'll be like, oh, well, we need to work with the other side and find common sense solutions. And like, no, dudes, every time the left gets in power, 51%, they push the agenda as far as they can without breaking it. You guys need to take ground back. Like, we've given up way too much ground. It's time to get it back.
Yeah, Billy, thanks for commenting on Facebook. Thanks for watching. I've made this comment too. Yeah, all these blue-haired cat ladies should be deported with all the other illegals. Hop on the same bus. You love them so much. Go live in their world. You think America has nothing to offer you, that it's full of white supremacists? Leave. If you hate it, leave. Yeah, I will gladly pay one-way airfare for those folks as well.
Oh my God, start a GoFundMe. I'll start donating tomorrow.
All right.
All right, where do we go next?
We got time for one more clip here. Let us take a look. I got to make sure a lot of these aren't appropriate. Let's talk Chicago. Let's talk Tom Homan.
I love this.
I'll just play the clip.
Incoming border czar Tom Homan is set to meet with New York City Mayor Eric Adams to discuss how the incoming Trump administration plans to execute its deportation plans in the sanctuary city. But Homan also has his eyes on another sanctuary city, declaring Chicago ground zero for the Trump administration's immigration crackdown. And some Chicago residents seem to be ready for change.
Mayor Brandon Johnson, you took an oath to uphold the Constitution. Or when you took an oath, was only intended to fight for the 10th and 14th Amendments regarding illegal aliens?
We don't want illegals in our community. We don't want migrants terrorizing our own people. And to have y'all sit up here and say, we have to accept $70 million being given to them when you got black people who are already struggling and need help, it is a disgrace.
Andre Smith is a former Democratic Illinois State House candidate and the founder of Chicago Against Violence. And he joins me now. Andre, good morning to you. So Tom Homan gave us a window into what to expect. He says come January 21st, there will be ICE agents in Chicago looking for gang members and criminals. If Mayor Brandon Johnson impedes those efforts, he will be prosecuted. How do you think residents in Chicago feel about that?
Well, good morning. As Chicagoans, we should be celebrating the season of joy, hope, and love. Yet, under our tree, we find neglect, disappointment. We find $575 million of taxpayers' money allocated to migrants. We are disappointed. Our shelters, our schools, our police stations, our field houses have all become shelters. And we have went through this thing, and we welcome the border czar to Chicago.
Yeah, and under Mayor Johnson, more than 51,000 migrants have arrived in Chicago since 2022.
I'm going to pause that graphic. 51,000 since just 2022, and look at the spending on those new arrivals. I can't even wrap my head around over $500 million in just a year and a half just for those folks. How is every single Chicagoan not up in arms about this?
I don't know if you know this either, but Illinois and Chicago are really expensive to live. Their tax rates are high. Todd did a whole episode on the American Tribune line about property taxes should be illegal. And I remember a friend of mine had like a $400,000 house in suburb of Chicago. And his property taxes were $12,000 a year for like a $400,000 house. Like this wasn't like a fancy house. And like if anybody watching from Chicago, let us know what your property taxes look like. But it's actually the whole thing's just hysterical. We let this many people in, this many people, we spend that much money. It does show too some of those communities. Like I wish we would have taught them to be more self-sufficient, because they're like, no, that government money should go to us. Gosh, I wish they'd kind of realize make me stop paying taxes so that we don't give them to them, and let me keep my money and I'll go do something with it and build a business. But that's an aside. But yeah, I think Chicago's going to be one of those make or break areas too, because I think they're going to oppose the deportation.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see. I'm going to choose my words carefully here. Larry Elder's been saying it a long time. But the black community was always going to be the community that got hit the hardest by illegal immigration, because those are the folks that are competing for government resources for the low-skilled jobs. And this is not a comment on the black community. That is just the facts on the ground in a lot of cases. And you're hearing the residents. We showed the clip. It was the black residents of Chicago that were out in Mayor Brandon Johnson's face saying this needs to stop. What about us? But this was always going to happen. It would be the black communities got hit hardest. We tried to say that. We got accused of being a racist for, saying something against blacks and now illegal. So now we're doubly racist for making all these observations. But here it is. The chickens have come home to roost. And to your point, Jason, yeah, in an ideal world, they wouldn't rely on government either. But now you are one step removed from the government assistance that right now they rely on. And I hate to say I told you so, but folks, stop voting for Democrat. How many of these Chicago residents over the years have just pulled the lever automatically for a Chicago Dem mayor or voted to give more money to the teachers union in Chicago? I think they spend like $20,000 per kid in the Chicago public school system. How is that working out? Are you voting for Kamala Harris? Because if the stats are true, 95% of black women, 80% of black men, I just don't get it. I don't get it. You can see this happening. You know what the answer is. And I'm glad that that dude is celebrating Tom Homan's plan. I'm under the impression he was probably running as a Democrat, though, for state legislature in Illinois. At some point, something just has to give. It is not Democrats that are going to save you, folks.
Well, and it kind of underscores another important issue that we talk about on the conservative side, but its point I think needs to be made is sometimes you have to watch, like, you don't want to give government too much power, because even if they're using that power to benefit you now, eventually as the political winds blow, somebody else gets that power that is not as nice about it or isn't on your side, and then it destroys you. Creating communities that are dependent on government assistance has that same blowback. They needed the black votes. They bribed you by giving you government benefits. All these Democrats continue bribing you rather than teaching you to be self-sufficient and how to take care of yourself. They tell you you're a victim. They tell you you can't survive without government assistance. And then when they're bringing in a new favored group, suddenly they give you less because they're giving the new favored group more. That's why some of us, like, don't give me any of it. Like, just quit taking my stuff so I can go get my own. And I know a lot of people in black communities, if we could change that mindset. Like, I tell the story, I used to do job placement stuff as a volunteer thing in a prison, and a lot of it was like black drug dealers. And I would talk to them. They were re-entering the workforce, and I would talk to them about how they built their, like, supply chains and how they looked at margins. I'm like, dude, you're a businessman. You're just selling an illegal drug. Like, do that same thing with chicken sandwiches or open a retail store. Like, it's all the same principles. And it was funny. They're like, now that you say it, it really is. And yeah, it's truly remarkable.
Wild stuff here. Yeah, I'm going to save Paul's comment for do a little plugging in on the technology here. But folks, we're running up on an hour. We hit our hour. I think it's time, Jason, for us to make the switch to Rumble, because we have got to talk about Ray's resignation, revelations about FBI involvement on January 6th. Another conspiracy, it would seem, is now just fact. But we can't talk about it on Facebook, can't talk about it on YouTube. So, folks, we're going to make the switch. Appreciate you all turning in. We got Billy over on Facebook. We got John, Michelle, Robert, Rose. If you want to continue to watch the show, we are not going anywhere, but we're just going to switch over to Rumble only. You can find our Rumble channel at the American Tribune. Jason, any parting thoughts?
Facebook, YouTube, we love you guys. And I wish those platforms were free speech where we could talk about things. And it's funny for those who are new to watching the show, like you've heard us say like 100 times, like, oh, can't quite address that. We got to go over to Rumble only. Rumble's an app like YouTube. If you're not familiar with it, they don't censor us. They won't blow up our channel for talking about January 6th. I'm just saying. So with that, folks, we love you. Hopefully you join us on Rumble. But Rumble, we're going to take a 60-second break, and then we'll see you on the other side.